You can hold your breath for 5 seconds without even thinking about it. You do it when you sneeze, when you dip underwater, when you brace for a flu shot. 5 seconds without breathing is nothing. Your body won't even notice. Your blood oxygen saturation won't drop a single percentage point. Your brain won't miss a beat. 5 seconds is a rounding error on the scale of human survival. So if every atom of oxygen on Earth vanished for just 5 seconds and then came right back, you'd be fine. You wouldn't even need to gasp. That's the intuition, and the intuition is completely, catastrophically wrong. Because the problem with removing oxygen for 5 seconds has almost nothing to do with breathing. Most people think of oxygen as the gas they breathe. That is a tiny fraction of what oxygen actually does. It is the most abundant element in the Earth's crust, at 46.6% by mass. It is 65% of your body weight. It is 88.9% of every water molecule by mass. It is roughly half the weight of every concrete structure ever built. The ozone layer that blocks ultraviolet radiation from sterilizing the surface of the planet is made of oxygen. The thin oxide coating on every metal surface that prevents metals from fusing together on contact is oxygen. The blue sky above your head exists partly because oxygen molecules scatter sunlight. Oxygen is not a luxury your lungs borrow from the atmosphere 20 times a minute. Oxygen is a structural element of matter itself, and we are about to remove every single atom of it for 5 seconds. Let's start counting. Second one. You are still holding your breath comfortably. Oxygen has been gone for maybe 300 milliseconds and you feel absolutely nothing. No alarm bells, no shortness of breath, nothing. And that is the cruelest part of this scenario. Because the world around you is already falling apart. The ozone layer is gone. It didn't thin, it didn't develop a hole over Antarctica like the one we spent decades worrying about. It ceased to exist entirely and instantaneously, because ozone is 3 oxygen atoms bonded together, and there are no more oxygen atoms. The full, unfiltered ultraviolet output of the sun is now hitting the daytime side of the Earth with nothing in the way. UVC radiation, the most energetic and dangerous band, the one that normal ozone blocks completely, is reaching the surface for the first time in billions of years. If you are standing outside in direct sunlight right now, your exposed skin is receiving a radiation dose equivalent to staring into a germicidal lamp at point-blank range. Sunburn is not the right word. The UV flux is intense enough to begin damaging DNA in exposed skin cells within seconds. Your eyes, if open and facing anything brighter than shade, are taking the same dose across the cornea. People on the night side of the planet don't notice yet. People in buildings are partially shielded by walls and glass, though standard window glass only blocks some UV wavelengths. Anyone outside, anywhere between the tropics especially, just got a blast of radiation that will manifest as severe burns within hours. And nobody knows it happened yet. That is the thing about UV damage. You don't feel UVC hitting your skin. There is no warmth, no sting, no warning signal. The damage is molecular. It is happening at the level of thymine dimers forming in your DNA, and your body's pain response won't catch up for hours. People are standing in the most dangerous light that has touched the Earth's surface in 2 billion years, and they feel fine. But that's not the worst part. While the ozone is disappearing above you, the buildings are disappearing around you. Concrete is approximately 50% oxygen by weight. Portland cement is a mixture of calcium oxide, silicon dioxide, aluminum oxide, iron oxide. The aggregate mixed into concrete is mostly silica and limestone, both oxygen-rich compounds. The water used to cure it is 88.9% oxygen by mass. When you remove every oxygen atom from a concrete structure, you don't get a weakened building. You get calcium, silicon, aluminum, and iron powder in a shape that used to be a building, with nothing binding any of it together. The structural integrity doesn't degrade, it vanishes. Every concrete structure on Earth collapses within the first second. Every bridge, overpass, dam, foundation wall, skyscraper core, parking garage, sidewalk, highway barrier, and basement floor. Not cracking. Not crumbling over hours like a demolition, turning to powder and falling under its own weight, all at once, everywhere. The sound alone would be beyond comprehension. 7 billion cubic meters of concrete on Earth, and in 1 second, it all becomes loose powder and metallic dust. We are 1 second in. 4 left. Second 2. The sky is changing color. Under normal conditions, the sky appears blue because gas molecules in the atmosphere scatter shorter wavelengths of sunlight more effectively than longer ones. Nitrogen does most of the heavy lifting here, since it makes up 78% of the atmosphere, but oxygen at 21% contributes significantly. With oxygen gone, the atmosphere just lost a fifth of its mass and a fifth of its scattering capacity. The sky doesn't go black yet, because nitrogen is still there doing its job, but the blue is noticeably dimmer, and the horizon has taken on a darker, almost bruised quality. More importantly, the sudden removal of 21% of atmospheric mass means the air pressure just dropped from the normal 101.3 kilopascals to roughly 80 kilopascals. That is equivalent to being suddenly teleported to about 2,000 meters elevation. Your ears pop. Hard. Every window and sealed door in every surviving structure groans or cracks as the pressure differential adjusts. Aircraft at cruising altitude experience a pressure drop both inside and outside the cabin, and the dynamics get complicated fast. Every sealed container, every pressurized system calibrated for normal atmospheric composition is now operating in conditions it was not designed for. Meanwhile, the metal world is entering a crisis of its own. Almost every metal surface on Earth is coated with a microscopically thin layer of oxide. Iron has iron oxide. Aluminum has aluminum oxide. Copper has copper oxide. These oxide layers form naturally when metal is exposed to air, and they serve as barriers that prevent the bare metal atoms underneath from interacting with the environment or with each other. When oxygen vanishes, every oxide layer on every metal surface on Earth vanishes with it. This is the exact condition that causes cold welding in outer space. When two pieces of clean, unoxidized metal touch each other, their atoms cannot tell where one piece ends and the other begins. They bond on contact. In the vacuum of space, this is a known engineering problem. Spacecraft components are specifically designed to prevent it. Here on Earth, we have never had to worry about it because oxygen constantly rebuilds those protective oxide layers. Now, every metal-to-metal contact point on the planet is a potential cold weld. Gears in machinery, ball bearings in motors, hinges on doors, rails under trains, the pistons inside every running engine. Anywhere two metal surfaces are touching and moving against each other, there is now a chance they simply fuse together. The Galileo spacecraft lost its high-gain antenna to cold welding when protective oxide layers were inadvertently removed during ground transport. That was one component on one spacecraft. This is every metal surface on the planet, all at once, with the protective oxide stripped away simultaneously. Engine pistons seize in their cylinders. Train wheels fuse to rails. The moving parts in every factory, every power plant, every piece of heavy machinery on Earth grind to a halt as bare metal bonds to bare metal. We are 2 seconds in. 3 left. Second 3. Here is where the chemistry gets truly violent. Water is one oxygen atom bonded to 2 hydrogen atoms. Remove the oxygen, and you are left with hydrogen gas. 2 atoms of hydrogen per former molecule of water, released as H2 gas. Hydrogen is the lightest element in existence. It is also wildly, enthusiastically flammable. The entire ocean doesn't vanish when oxygen disappears. What happens is worse. Every water molecule on Earth decomposes into hydrogen gas simultaneously. The oceans, the lakes, the rivers, the groundwater, the moisture in the air, the water inside every living cell of every organism. It all breaks down at once. The oceans don't drain. They evaporate upward as an incomprehensibly vast cloud of hydrogen gas, because liquid hydrogen at atmospheric pressure and normal temperatures doesn't exist. It boils at minus 253 degrees Celsius, so the hydrogen doesn't pool where the water was. It disperses, rapidly, in every direction. And it is looking for any ignition source to introduce it to the concept of explosion. Except it can't actually ignite because combustion requires oxygen, and there is no oxygen. So for these 5 seconds, the hydrogen just accumulates everywhere, in enormous, invisible, odorless concentrations. Remember this. We will come back to it. The oceans themselves have effectively vaporized. Seawater is 96.5% water by mass, and that water is 88.9% oxygen. The mass of the world's oceans is about 1.335 billion trillion kilograms. Remove the oxygen, and you lose roughly 86% of that mass. The ocean basins, which currently hold water averaging 3,688 meters deep, are suddenly nearly empty. What remains is a slurry of dissolved salts, minerals, and the non-oxygen components of hydrogen gas that is already billowing upward. Every ship afloat drops to whatever surface is below it. The average ocean depth is 3,688 meters. A supertanker weighing 400,000 tons in full load falls nearly 4 kilometers onto exposed seabed. Every submarine falls. Every marine organism, from blue whales to krill, is suddenly suspended in a gaseous environment with no water around it, dropping toward a seabed that is itself disintegrating because the minerals in ocean floor basalt are oxygen-rich too. And we haven't even talked about what is happening underground. The Earth's crust is 46.6% oxygen by weight, nearly half. Oxygen is bound into the silicate minerals that compose most rock. Quartz is silicon dioxide. Feldspar is an aluminum silicate. These are the building blocks of the ground beneath your feet, and they are all roughly half oxygen by mass. Remove that oxygen, and the crust loses almost half its substance. It doesn't just weaken. The mineral lattice structures that hold rock together depend on oxygen atoms sitting in specific positions within the crystal. Pull them out, and the crystal structure collapses. The ground beneath you is no longer solid. The top layer of the Earth's crust begins to disintegrate into a powdery mixture of silicon, aluminum, iron, calcium, and other metals that used to be rock. How deep this goes depends on how you interpret the scenario, but even the top few meters collapsing is enough. Every foundation that wasn't already destroyed by the concrete failure is now sinking into powder. The ground itself is falling. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is what is happening inside your body right now at second 4. This is the delayed bomb. Your body is 65% oxygen by weight. Most of that oxygen is in your water. Your body is roughly 60% water, and as we just covered, that water is decomposing into hydrogen gas. But oxygen is also in your bones, which are largely calcium phosphate, an oxygen-containing compound. It is in your DNA, which has oxygen atoms in its sugar phosphate backbone. It is in every protein, every carbohydrate, every fat molecule, every single piece of biological machinery keeping you alive. At second 4, the water in your cells has already decomposed. The structural molecules in your tissues are disintegrating as oxygen atoms are ripped from their positions. You are not suffocating. Suffocation is what happens when you can't get oxygen into your lungs. What is happening to you is molecular disintegration. Your cells are losing their structural integrity from the inside out. The fluid in your inner ear, which gives you your sense of balance, is water-based. It is gone. Every human being on Earth is simultaneously deaf and unable to balance, though by second 4, balance is academic, because the ground you would be trying to stand on is also gone. Your blood, which is mostly water, is decomposing in your veins. This is not survivable. 5 seconds without breathing is trivial. 4 seconds without the oxygen atoms in your body's own molecules is the end of biology. And we haven't even talked about the atmosphere catching fire. Second 5, the final second. Oxygen reappears. Every oxygen atom returns to its original position. In theory, every molecule reforms. Water reconstitutes. Concrete resolidifies. The ozone layer snaps back into place. Metal surfaces reoxidize. Your blood becomes liquid again. Your DNA reknits. But that is the theoretical version, and reality is less cooperative. Because for the last 4 seconds, The structural context of those oxygen atoms has been destroyed. The concrete that turned to powder has already fallen and scattered. The oxygen atoms return, but the calcium and silicon atoms they need to bond with have shifted, separated, mixed with dirt and debris. You don't get a building back. You get oxygen atoms arriving at a location where a building used to be and finding nothing in the right position to bond with. The water returns, in principle. Hydrogen atoms that were dispersed as gas across the former ocean basins and into the atmosphere are suddenly rebonded with oxygen. But they are not in the ocean anymore. They are spread across a volume hundreds of times larger than the original ocean. The water reconstitutes as a diffuse mist, a global fog of reconstituted water molecules spread across the volume that the hydrogen gas expanded into during those 5 seconds. Some of it rains back down. Most of it is in the wrong place. The oceans do not refill in second 6. They refill over weeks, maybe months, as the water cycle slowly collects what was scattered. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is the hydrogen that didn't get recaptured. During those 5 seconds, hydrogen gas from decomposed water was expanding outward. Some of it reached the upper atmosphere. Some of it, being the lightest element, achieved escape velocity and left Earth's gravitational field entirely. It is gone. Permanently. Every hydrogen atom that escaped during those 5 seconds is a water molecule that will never exist on Earth again. The planet's total water budget has been permanently reduced. Not by a catastrophic amount, probably, given that 5 seconds isn't long enough for most hydrogen to reach escape velocity, but some did. And that water is never coming back. The people who were inside buildings when the concrete disintegrated are buried in powder and rebar. The people who were in cars on bridges are in the rivers below, or in the rubble of collapsed overpasses. The people on upper floors of skyscrapers with concrete cores fell with the structure. None of these people experienced 5 seconds without breathing. They experienced 5 seconds without a floor. The ground resolidifies, sort of. The minerals in the crust reform with oxygen, but the crystal structures that give rock its strength require slow formation under specific pressure and temperature conditions. Oxygen atoms returning instantaneously to a pile of metallic powder don't recreate granite. They create a loosely bonded oxide powder that might eventually compact into something rock-like under geological pressure over millions of years. For now, the surface of the Earth is a layer of powdery mineral oxide, sitting on top of whatever deeper rock was less affected. It is not stable. It is not load-bearing in the way bedrock is. It is silt. The UV damage from second 1 is already done. Skin cells on the daytime side of the planet absorbed a burst of unfiltered UVC radiation. The ozone layer is back now, blocking it again, but DNA damage doesn't reverse when the threat goes away. Millions of people will develop severe UV burns. The long-term skin cancer rates on the daytime hemisphere spike permanently. Every concrete structure is still rubble. The oxygen came back, but gravity didn't wait. The buildings fell in second 1. The bridges collapsed in second 1. The dams broke in second 1. And the water they were holding, which itself decomposed and then reconstituted as scattered mist, is no longer behind the dam. It is everywhere and nowhere. The infrastructure damage is total and global. Not damaged, not repairable, gone. The biological toll is the hardest to estimate because it depends on whether molecular reconstitution actually works at biological scales. If every oxygen atom truly returns to its exact original position and reforms every original bond, then in theory, living organisms could survive. Your water reforms, your proteins reknit, your DNA reassembles. You'd feel like you got hit by a truck, but you might live. If, however, the reconstitution is even slightly imperfect, if even a fraction of a % of oxygen atoms return to positions a few angstroms off from where they need to be, then every protein in your body has misfolded, every DNA strand has errors, and every cell membrane has gaps. You are not alive in any functional sense. You are a body-shaped object made of almost the right molecules in almost the right positions, and almost is not good enough for biochemistry. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is something we flagged at second 3 and haven't come back to yet: the hydrogen. During those 5 seconds, the decomposition of all water on Earth released approximately 1.49 times 10 to the 20th kilograms of hydrogen gas into the environment. When oxygen returned at second 6, much of that hydrogen recombined with oxygen to form water again. That recombination is not a gentle process. Hydrogen and oxygen combining is combustion. It is an exothermic reaction. It is, in fact, the reaction that powers rocket engines. The space shuttle's main engines burned hydrogen and oxygen to produce thrust. When oxygen reappears and encounters the vast clouds of hydrogen gas that have been accumulating for 5 seconds, the recombination doesn't happen quietly. It happens as fire, across the entire planet. Everywhere that hydrogen gas has concentrated at a combustible ratio with the newly returned oxygen, ignition occurs. The atmosphere itself burns in patches. The surface, already devastated by structural collapse and UV exposure, is now swept by combustion waves as hydrogen and oxygen reunite energetically. This is not a local fire. This is a global combustion event triggered by the reunion of elements that were never supposed to be separated. 5 seconds. That was the whole thing. You could hold your breath through it. You could count it on one hand. 5 seconds is not enough time to finish a yawn. But oxygen is not just air. It is nearly half the mass of the ground, nearly all the mass of water, the majority of your body weight, the shield against ultraviolet radiation, the barrier between metals, and the glue in every mineral crystal on the planet. Removing it for 5 seconds is not like holding your breath. It is like removing the screws, nails, bolts, and welds from every structure, vehicle, body, and geological formation on Earth simultaneously, letting everything collapse under gravity for 5 seconds, and then putting the fasteners back. The fasteners are fine. Everything they were holding together is on the floor.